Hello, everyone. We are starting a new session for our Civic Design course. We are really happy today because we have the opportunity to talk about something interesting, platform design. Before telling more about our special guest, just some little information about the session. As you know, the session is in streaming right now in YouTube, and we will be happy to hear from you any question and any doubt. This is a great occasion to have the opportunity to talk directly with our special guests, so don't hesitate and don't lose the opportunity to have this debate and this connection. And we will be aware about the question directly on YouTube, but our participants could even join us on the Hangout. So you get the link to join us in video conference on Slack. So don't hesitate as well. It's a really great opportunity. If you want, you could also post any comment on Twitter using the reference to Civic Design hashtag and PD Toolkit hashtag connected with the guest we have today. So let's introduce our special guest. We are here with Simone Cicero. He's connected from Rome, and Simone Cicero defined himself as a self-starter, strategist, interested in co-design, design thinking, and innovation. And now, since several years, I think even 5 years, he's promoting this interesting work on platform design toolkit. And I think today will be the opportunity to learn more about his approach and also understand better what is this concept of platform design. So thanks for your time, Simone. And I would like also to say hello to, before to talk with Simone, to Daniele and Ottavia. Hello, Daniele and Ottavia. You know that Daniele and Ottavia are the tutors in Italy. Where are you now based, talking?
I'm talking from Centre Pompidou in Paris.
I'm from Milan right now.
Okay, great. So, Simone, welcome. It's now your time.
Well, thank you. I mean, thanks for your intro. Again, very excited to be here with you, and I'm looking forward to tell you a little bit more of the work we are doing. Essentially, as Domenico said, I'm working since 5 years, more or less, in developing tools for, I would say, helping organizations of all kinds and designers to design for ecosystems. So that's the idea behind the Platform Design Toolkit. It's a work that is in continuity with the tradition of design thinking and also lean startup, I would say, and in general, all these lean development tools. What we did more or less is to evolve the traditional design tools in service design, for example, or integrate them, I would say, to shift the perspective from the what normally we call the customer centricity or the human-centric design into what we call ecosystem-centric design. So we always speak about relationship centricity. So what the work we are trying to do is to create new tools that can integrate existing tools in helping organizations and teams to design for relational systems, what we call ecosystems somehow. So let me just give you a little bit more ground. I don't know, maybe I can share a couple of the slides very, very quickly. That would be, I think, useful to understand. So you should be able to see my screen now. I don't want to go full screen because it just, well, maybe it's useful. But basically, the question is, we are acknowledging a couple of key motivations when we started to work in this new direction. And, basically one is the growth of potential at the edge of systems. So normally we need to acknowledge that technology is bringing new capabilities essentially to small entities. So individuals, so small companies, small organizations, they are growing in their potential to impact systems. And so this is one, for sure, one particular driver of, I would say, enabler of this platformization of the economy. On the other side, we have the growth of the impact of phenomena like the long tail. So essentially, this means that everybody is expecting a spatial solution to its own problem. So we have this growing expectation for customized, personalized solutions to problems. And what happens essentially is that you move from the industrial type of organization that is an organization that controls the means of production and controls the production process, let's say, tightly, and leverages on labor to produce mass market one-size-fits-all solutions, into this network and organizer, no? So this enabler, this hub that connects potential to expectations, essentially. So this platform organization. In terms of major changes in the organization, we can say that industrial organizations normally look for scale, while platform organizations look for scope, so to serve and personalize, to respond to the expectations and the possibilities of the long tail. They target no more just consumers, but producers and consumers, so ecosystems, I would say. So they try to connect them, let's say.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
We don't know why, but in the streaming, people are not seeing your screen. So
okay. So let me stop using it. So you can see my face now, I guess, again.
No, actually, I don't know why, but people is seeing me, not you, and it's really strange because I
think you need to click. You need to click on my icon. Maybe that should help.
Yes, I did, but doesn't work. I don't know why. Actually, right now it's marked on you, but it's really strange because people is seeing me. I think it's not really.
Okay, so I will avoid to use lights basically at this point. So. Should I go ahead?
Yes, I see. It's a little bit annoying because you are talking and people are seeing me, but I'm sorry, I don't know why it's happening that.
Okay.
Because I am even using the cameraman tool, selecting your screen, but it doesn't work. So I don't know how. Let's go ahead. I will try during the session to solve this little.
Okay. By the way, all this material is available online, so I can send you a couple of links so people can relate to that. But in general, I think the question is that we understand that there is a shift in the potential that we are seeing in people in systems. So small entities, small individuals. Small teams, small organizations that are becoming more powerful, I would say. And according to this, the optimal shape, let's say, of the organization is no more the industrial organization or the pipeline that can produce replicable, massive, common products and solutions, I would say. But it's becoming the network, the orchestrator. There is a book from Barry Liebert, which is quite interesting. It's called the network imperative, and it's an analysis of the evolution of business models and explains really well this evolution between asset builders, service providers, these kind of traditional institutions of the 20th century and the new institutions, so the organizers, the orchestrators. So this is more or less what we are seeing, and everybody's talking about Airbnb, Uber, and Salesforce, and Android, and Amazon, and all these big organizations that are transforming everything. But in reality, if you look a bit deeper, you will see that this is a trend, it's a shift. Last week, there was an interesting report from Andrew Chen, which is a fellow of Andersen Horowitz, and he speaks about the future of services, and it's essentially explaining how the future of services is in marketplaces. So that's more or less the point. Everything is shifting towards these networks, these marketplaces. So what does it mean for us? So what did we do? Essentially, we did tools. So instead of writing just another book on platforms, like thousands, not thousands, but tens of people have been doing in the last years, in 2013 we decided to start. I decided, and now there's a growing team to start to do tools. So design tools that one can use. Everything is open source, in Creative Commons, and in parallel to the tools, we also started to develop what I call a knowledge model, and share these conversations and reflections on our blog, for example, so in an open conversation. So everybody that is interested in the work we are doing can go to our website, which is www.platformdesigntoolkit.com, and essentially download everything we do in open source, and including guides. So every process that we use can be used quite easily. So I think the question for this call, the interesting question for this call and for this group is really about relating the work we are doing with civic innovation. So the context of your work. And I think it's interesting to have this conversation starting from this initial reflection. I was in Paris last week with a group of people talking about essentially this. So how do we use these platforms to innovate our institutions and to innovate at the civic level or the social level, and so on. And I think, the consideration I got after all these reflections is that we are more or less used to giving people the possibility to, for example, participate to decision making. So there are plenty of projects for collaborative budgeting or taking decisions together, or these platforms like the CDM or things like that. And this is, of course, very interesting. But I think what we need to understand is that is the moment that we give citizens no more freedom to decide or potential to decide. We should focus, I think, on economic freedom. So essentially, freedom to create value. So what do you know? What do you need to give citizens the possibility to create value? I would say that you need to give them what we call an economic space. So platforms and platform strategies that actually can mobilize the ecosystem should be seen as enablers of the economic spaces. So enable people, for example, to take over things such as food production, such as education, such as, I don't know, mobility, and things like that. So my point, I think, is that in the evolution we are seeing on the market, we're probably going to see in the future a new business models that emerge that are more focused on empowering self-organization at the civic level than on, basically centralizing and controlling. So there will be new coming entities in the economy, I think, that will embrace and leverage on the potential of citizens to self-organize and do that with a business model, essentially. So it's not going to be anymore about, helping people to collaborate with institutions, with political institutions or social institutions, but it's going to be more about helping people to become institutions. And to do that, I think we can expect the platforms of the future. So organizations that will be interested to create a business model that can enable this to happen. So that's more or less the research we are doing, and it deals a lot with integrating platform thinking. So the traditional idea that we design to organize interactions in marketplaces and reduce transaction cost and create services for continuous improvement with technologies like the blockchain, for example, and especially tokens or crypto tokens. So all these things that can be used to create financial innovation on top of use case innovation. So integrate financial incentives with usage incentives. And I think the key is to design this kind of strategies, tools, and to be able to allow communities to invest in their future, to invest in their future and to run their future. And my assumption is that if we really allow communities to do that, what we get is a continuous reduction of the systemic risk that is related to these communities. So to be more clear in what I'm saying, if a community will, and it can be a community of producers and consumers, for example, if this community organizes a supply chain of a food, let's say of a food context, like it can be, I don't know, wheat or fruits or vegetables or whatever, they will organize to make the system more resilient. And I think that there is an opportunity in reducing these liabilities, these systemic liabilities, to monetize it. So that's why I'm advocating for a business model that works in this context. So the future, I think, of your civic innovator in your course and beyond will be about inventing these new business models that can reduce systemic liabilities at community level. And do that through economic spacing, so to create platforms that can enable economic activity, not just anymore collaborating and taking decisions with 20th century institutions that are really losing relevance these days. So that's more or less a context of our work with your context. I think it doesn't really make sense for me to make a pitch of PDT because everything is open source. You just go to the website, you get everything in 2 hours. You understand what it's all about, and you can start to work. So maybe let's use these few minutes to have a conversation on what does it mean in terms of new business, new organizations that we can create. I hope this makes a little bit of sense.
Okay, thanks a lot. So we solved the problem with the video, sharing all my...
That's a bit psychedelic now, but that's fine.
So I really appreciate the presentation, and especially as you said, you have all your content and reflection online, so people could look for it directly online. But I think it's especially interesting talk and discuss about how actually all of your work on ecosystems and platform is helpful for the approach of civic design or civic innovation. And I especially appreciate this comment about having economic freedom. So it's something that is really, really important. And I think all the people that are working on territory, urban or rural development, a lot of time we approach these issues as an urbanist or architect, I don't know, designer, in the sense of a really physical approach or sometimes social approach, even social approach, but we forget a lot the economical part. And I think this is the opportunity to talk with the civic realm in a way, connected with all this discussion about the need to create value. So it's really interesting talking about society, talking about territory, talking about governance, how we inhabit together the same territory, and not talk about this idea of needs or problems issue, but in another way, talking about how we enable people to create value. I really appreciate this this comment. So and this idea also to people to become institutions. So my question is taking in account all of your work, where we could start to change the traditional approach. I mean, in a way, who could be the people we will work with when it's not just a company that want to change their approach. You know what I mean? In a territory approach, so we could work with public administration. You talk a lot about community. So how we work with this community, local communities.
Well, that's a huge point. So I think in my experience, there are a couple of projects I can relate with. So for example, one project I'm trying to help is, and not doing it enough because of other things, but essentially it's a project that is based on the work that was done at the rural hub in Salerno. No? So these guys created this hub like a few years ago, and the seeds, the cultural seeds that they have been planting in this context, then generated a very interesting community, a community of producers. So there are people producing wheat, and with this wheat they produce potentially pasta or bread or something like that. So at the end of the day, what they're trying to do, they're trying to essentially organize producers and consumers, and somehow allowing consumers to invest in these producers so that these producers can buy, invest the money in, I don't know, facilities or machines or things like that. So that starts to be interesting because you have a consumer there that is able no more to just consume, but to invest in securing this food chain and to take a stake on the quality of the and on the value that this food chain is going to produce. So here the trick is to create a financial tool. So it's essentially something that, well, you can, in this case, we are talking about, the idea we were talking about was to create a cooperative of producers and consumers. So that's interesting. I can make a parallel, for example, with another project that is still from Italy, from the north of Italy. It's called Energia Positiva. It's a cooperative of energy production. So in this case, you have a cooperative that is buying and installing solar panels on top of existing buildings. And then I've been able to buy shares of this cooperative, because this is in Italian is Società Cooperativa per Azioni. It's a shared-based cooperative, essentially, where you can buy shares. And then I'm buying these shares. This cooperative produces some kind of markup that it gets paid back to me in terms of energy. So I get paid in energy. So I invest in the company, I get paid the interest in energy. So this is somehow a model that I think is emerging. So the idea that communities, I'm not talking about local communities, I'm talking about in general a community that can be based on producers and consumers interested in some kind of goods. The idea that consumer can invest into building this cooperative production system. So another last context where I'm thinking about this is education, for example. So I myself, I'm sending my kid, the other one is too small, to this school, which is a libertarian school here in Frascati, where I live, and it's a self-organized school. So basically, there's some passionate educators and parents that are co-organizing an education institution, so a school, which it may seem, it's a kid school, it's a very young one, so primary school and kindergarten, and it may seem something very simple and stupid, just a school, but I think this is crucial because the school is a way to build the governance of the future. So it's going to be very important. Education is the most important thing we need to invest money now. And this is quite interesting because in my experience, trying to build this has been crazy complicated. And why is so complicated? First of all, because there is no support system. So there is no institution which has a business model of some kind that is designed to help us do this. And interestingly enough, in the US now, there is a platform called Wonder Schools that is essentially doing this. So it's essentially helping people to organize kindergartens at home. So this is just to make an example. This company, the company in the US, is a traditional venture with traditional investment. Actually, is baked by Andersen Horowitz. So my question is, how long does it take for us to develop new financial tools for communities instead of venture capital to invest in this? So that's the question. And another question that I think I need to ask is my experience, the problem in organizing community-based value production is not just a matter of lacking platforms that can help. It's also a matter of lacking capabilities in people. So people don't know how to collaborate. People don't know how to relate with each other. People don't really know how to take decisions together. So I think if you really want to start somewhere, it's about planting the seeds of collaboration in your community, in your territory, in your city, in your urban context. So let the people grow so that they can think so big that can change maybe a global aspect and by creating a global platform maybe. But essentially, the first thing you need to start is from the people and letting them understand that they can do that because, it's so complex and people don't have this capability to work together, to organize in teams, to think, I don't want to say to think big, but actually neither to think small sometimes because they cannot even communicate with each other.
Sí, realmente, really, really interesting. I think this idea you just said about collaboration is a really important point, and sometimes even it's not just collaborate by citizens, but also create new bridges between different institutions that are not used to work well together. So we have also this problem. So I don't know if Ottavia and Daniele want to ask something or if there is some question from the chat. No question? No.
No, we have no question from the chat right now. And everyone in the chat on YouTube, if you want, you can share your questions.
There is a question right now, I think. Giuseppe Sardone said, however big is the scale of the product service startups you are involved in, how much important is an initial research approach through the system land of job?
I would appreciate if you can share it maybe in the chat so I can read it.
Yes. Maybe Daniele is doing that. Perfect.
I'm not sure I understand the system land of job, but maybe you guys can help me.
Me neither, actually, is my same doubt. I don't know. System land of job. I don't know if thinking is referring about the context. See the job we have to do with the context, where as we are all the time working on specific territory. I don't know if he's referring about it. I don't know.
Sorry. The question, I think, so the question about the local context and the global context, I think it's really about trying to see scale in what we do. So just to be clear, so now of course you can solve or you can create value on a local level, but most of the time this local level is just one potentially in context to implement something that can work on can scale at a global level, or in general more general level, I would say. So I think it's always interesting to design solutions, or in general to design, I would say, mobilization strategies. Imagine, for example, what I mentioned on energy or food, but trying to design them in a way that they can be largely applicable to global context. Because why essentially this? Because this comes back to the idea of platforms, which is creating systems that accrue value, that create more value for the user, for example, as they grow bigger. So the idea of the network effects, that is the key differentiator of platforms. So why platforms are so important and so I would say they are dominating the economy is just because they have been able to tap into this idea of network effects. So the network effects are powerful because they essentially create more value as the strategy becomes bigger. So they tend to attract players and to attract talent, to attract consumers, essentially become monopolies, I would say. So when we think about transforming a social context or any kind of citizen related context, I think we really need to think big, because thinking big at the end it generates more value. So thinking small is fine for most of your strong ties related activities. So I would say of course some more, and I don't know, there could be some activities that are definitely more about small teams interacting on a specific topic, but most of the important issues like it can be food, energy, or this context where we really need to change things, these are the global issues. So you also mentioned this idea of collaborating with institutions. And I think that this is the last opportunity for our institutions to play a role in this transformation. So essentially, institutions need to understand that they need to create these new platforms. So they need to familiarize with the idea, for example, of different models of sustaining themselves, besides taxes or things like that. So it's really about for them to reinvent themselves. The question is, I think, that they don't have the monopoly anymore. So now citizens can invent institutions. Citizen can do governance. Governance is no more a monopoly of 20th century institutions like cities or governments or ministries or whatever. No? So the question is, let's not wait for institutions to transform, but let's build new institutions. I think this is more or less what I would advocate for.
Continuing with this reflection, I would like to ask you about scale. Actually, I think it's really interesting, this idea that we need to think big, and we know that actually citizens are not used to do that. So I think we have this problem that we have huge opportunities. We have this network effect. We have platforms that allows us to organize ourselves, to organize systems that allow us to produce energy, food, and etc. But I think that the problem is that general public is not used to think in this term. So my question is also in terms of institution. It's really interesting, this idea that this is the last opportunity for them to play a role. I think I agree. So as well as citizens, we can create, enable new institution. The problem again is that actually we are not aware about that. So as a general citizens, I'm not really aware about this opportunity, this kind of organization. As you said as well, we are not used to collaborate. So my question is, there is this gap between what we could do and what actually we are doing. So there is some people, some citizens, some companies, some institutions making some step ahead, but I think it's not enough. And even maybe I think it's quite difficult to achieve critical mass to have a real change. I am an optimistic, but what I want to ask you is related with our professional approach. What I mean is, a lot of people we are now seeing, we are now figuring out this new opportunity. And when we work with other people as professionals, maybe sometimes we are asked to do something that is no sense in this way. So we have this need to work to get money to live, but at the same time we have to redirect the job we received to change in an ethical way. I don't know, you understand what I mean? It's need to it's quite an ethical approach to redirect institutions, companies, and people through this new approach, but sometimes they are not asking exactly for that. So how we could tackle, how we could approach this problem? Because if we are seeing this new world, but people are not asking for them, how we could change?
Well, that's a bold question, and I think I will answer with a bold answer.
Yeah, okay.
So the question is, I think we are not aware fully that we live in the complexity age. So our institutions are not just, I would say, slow. They are failing.
Yes.
They are failing to generate, for example, welfare for us. No? You look at the TV and or news, and you see that institutions are failing. You see what's happening in France, Italy, the UK. Yeah. So in the UK, institutions couldn't even manage to make a deal with the EU based on a decision that the citizens have been taking, the Brexit. So So the question is, let's understand one thing. We are entering a world in turmoil. We are going to enter a world in which you are going to be your welfare. You, your communities, your teams, your systems. You need to build the system, because the system, the institutional 20th century system is failing, is crumbling down. I've been working with the UN, and I can tell you that, you know, we don't have any clear idea of how to create a system governance for the 21st century. We are going to grow, we are going to go through the turmoil of climate change. Now, this is going to happen for sure. So how do we answer to this? So we need to build our systems. We need to build our the systems that will create more security for us, you know, as communities, as teams. So you are your welfare, essentially. So what does it mean in terms of the work we are doing? We need to stop the impostor syndrome. So somehow we need to stop going to institutions and ask them to support our work. You know what I mean? We need to create real value at scale by organizing citizens, by organizing economic actors. Let's forget the institutions. Because most of the time, you know, if we look now at the institutions in Europe, for example, you know, some people are enthusiastic about what's happening in Barcelona or some other cities. Some cities are doing some good work, but in general, the trend is about institutions that are losing their impact on our life. No? They really cannot stand with the transformation, the complexity that we are seeing. So the question is, we need to give up the imposter syndrome and stop doing consultancies and stop doing, asking for money. We really need to make economic activity. We need to make this new age of startups. Let's call it as you want. But basically, the question is, we need to become entrepreneurial citizens, I think. And what can we do as experts, let's say, as designers? Well, let's talk about designers.
Yes.
I think we need to create and share our methods like we are doing. But for example, if you talk about this with me, I'm looking forward for the next year to really do some kind of, I would say, real work on real projects. So besides the method, besides the consultings that we do with companies and organizations of all kinds, I think it's our responsibility to actually now go and create things directly, becoming real entrepreneurs, you know? Because that's what every citizen is expected to do in the future. And again, I think about the organization we need to build for this future are organizations that enable this. So organizations that can thrive on enabling citizens to become entrepreneurs and to organize value creation and economic activity on a small scale, but on a global scale. So that's what we need to do. We need to enable this new age, this new wave of organizations that organize economic activity locally, but are connected globally. And this means new business models. This means creating new post-industrial institutions. So there's no other, I think there's no other thing that we can do. We need to build these institutions. We need to build organizations, companies that can exist in a world in turmoil, that can exist in a complex world. And it's up to us, because the traditional capital is not going to build them. Or maybe it is, who knows? For sure, the traditional institutions are not going, well, that's my impression. No way a traditional 20th century governance can build this. I think there's such a huge cultural gap that the capabilities that we have to build this is not going to be in the institutions. It's going to be in entrepreneurial citizen communities.
Yes, I think it's really interesting. I also have to say that this reflection, someone could misunderstand. I think, you know, this idea to be entrepreneurial citizens, but I think it's really interesting, and maybe we could mention some example. I really like, for instance, the project of Airbnb. Maybe you heard about it. So, and I think it's a great example about what we are saying, is that idea, okay, institutions and the actual market is creating gentrification. As designers and as experts, we could say and do a lot of things in terms of consultancy or, work with institution. But I think personally, actually, I'm also trying to do that. It's more interesting to be involved in this kind of project, because in this we are creating a new idea of platform involving different kind of stakeholders, and maybe we can produce new solutions without this need, with this constantly need for bigger or hub institution. I don't know how to say. So I think is if I understand, is what we are saying. No,
when you talk about Airbnb, for example, that's another very interesting point. And I think we are not going to solve this issue by saying we need a fair Airbnb. Because we don't just need a fair Airbnb, we need a fair Airbnb which is also evolving as fast as Airbnb. So that fair Airbnb would be very much competitive with Airbnb. What is the issue? The issue is that in the meantime, we think about building a fair Airbnb. Airbnb is thinking about new things. And some of them may be fair. you know, that's the point. I think we are living in this transition now. Now we have, for example, companies that are born in a traditional venture capital context, but now they are realizing that they live in complexity. So, for example, if you're following what Airbnb is doing with Samara, which is very interesting, they're experimenting in housing. Of course, there is still much more space to build, I would say, fair cooperative alternatives. But I think the question is not just about making what exists more fair, but it's about thinking new ways to do things which are inherently fairer because they are more decentralized, more distributed, but they need to be as fast in evolving as the traditional industrial competitors. So evolution is going to be key in the future. We cannot think about, okay, let's build Airbnb now, and then for 10 years it stays like it is. I think, maybe that could be interesting, it could work, but we need to be bolder, I think, in building something different and I would say with the same ambitions. So that's why. But maybe, go ahead.
Maybe is there the key, the issues, because we understand that as a platform, community-led, we could do something fairer. But at the end, how we could organize this community with the same velocity, the same agility has a big company as Uber, Airbnb, etc. So maybe there we should work.
Well, for example, the crypto communities, these crypto token projects, most of them have been the ICO projects. Most of them are like just fresh air that somebody has sold for a lot of money, but some of them are really doing good work. And they succeed to raise a lot of money to do the work that they are doing. And then they can compete because they have money. So once you have money, then it's about talent that you can attract. Your narrative, your brand, your capabilities. So there are plenty of these decentralized companies now that are doing very interesting work that is going to be probably the next wave of organizational and product innovation. And again, some other things are coming up. If you look at the work that, for example, Thibaut is doing on continuous organizations, that's another thing you may want to click and search. This idea that we can develop new, more, I would say, open financial vehicles for investing in an idea that are more democratic and more open and more continuous, and less about investing in a company and then looking for a liquidity event. I think this is the kind of innovation we need to do. We need to innovate also the way we invest in the future. And maybe if we change the way we invest, maybe we are going to create something different. Maybe we don't want to create another Airbnb. Maybe we want to create something different. Maybe we want to create a housing cooperative, I don't know, or maybe we want to create a food producer. I don't know really, but it's also about how we change and create something new instead of looking at what exists and say, okay, we need to make a fairer version of this.
Yes, so yes, my concern about this is, as we also said during all the session, for instance, crypto money or blockchain, etc. My concern is how we could say that as entrepreneurial citizens that could change our ambient, our realm, could do that when they actually don't understand what is exactly a blockchain. What I mean is, I don't know, but what do you mean about it actually? I understand that the success of platform is that actually that they are cutting the complexity for the user, because when we use platform as Airbnb, Uber, etc., what is amazing actually is the user experience. With a simple gesture, I could have a really amazing service. So I don't need to understand a lot of stuff behind this service. So when we have a community-led platform, how we could achieve this level? No, we need people that understand actually what we are doing. So this gap, how you? Well,
I think the question is that you're never going to have a community-led platform. So the question is, we need to understand that when you do organize economic activity in ecosystems, you don't just have the ecosystem. You need the ecosystem and the architect. So there is an ecosystem that wants to create value, but you need an architect that designs this interaction, that creates these possibilities, that evolves, listen and evolves. So innovation, for example, in ecosystem is all about listening what the ecosystem wants to do and institutionalize this into the platform experience. So for example, what Airbnb has been doing with the new things that they introduced is heavily based on what the ecosystem was doing. So there is a duality in creating economic possibilities in ecosystems. There is the ecosystem that is trying to express itself, but then you need someone that is architecting this, developing this, innovating this, evolving this. Traditionally, this role has been played by startups in the last 10 years, I would say, more or less. So startups, they design, they consolidate, they make to create a lot of value, and then they are traditionally created by financial investors, by venture capital investors. So the question is, who else can play the role of the architect? And crypto, for example, the crypto projects are creating some kind of new institutions. So for example, most of the crypto projects, they are based on foundations. Others like Aragon, for example, they're doing quite interesting work. They are actually creating, somehow trying to put the network in the position of the architect. So, for example, they invest in ideas coming from the community. So teams that come from the community can create new features of the platform. But at the end, we are not going to solve this friction between the role of the architect and the ecosystem. So I think innovation at the end is always forever going to be an entrepreneurial thing. You really need an entrepreneur that can visualize the future and make the future happen. This is never going to happen by, from a community. The communities can innovate in a way that is disobedient, that is emergent, but then you need someone that is going to be there, listen, design, institutionalize these innovations. This evolutionary aspect of creating the new never happens by just bottom up. You need someone that at some point is going to listen what's happening bottom up and make this somehow a new thing. So you need this architect. The big question is, what is going to be the shape of this architect in the future? Maybe it's not a startup. Maybe it's something else that we want to create. But the question is, if we don't create this something else, this role is going to be played by what exists. So companies, crypto is doing experiments at least. So I think what we need to do is continue these experiments, maybe learn from the crypto projects that have been experimenting with this. And maybe we can find a way, maybe on a smaller scale, to somehow create a different vehicle for this. I don't know, really. That's up to us. There's no one is going to tell us, okay, communities are going to innovate like this. Not going to happen.
Yes. Seeing is really inspiring. And I love actually this sensation I have right now that I want to think bigger than before talking with you. So it's amazing.
I think
I don't know.
That's one thing, Domenico. Indy Joar once said, I'm often looking and following his work. He said that this social innovation thing needs to go out of the corner shop sites. It needs to be something bigger,
Yeah. No, definitely. Yes. I agree. So we spent almost an hour with you, really interesting. Ottavia, Daniele, I don't know if you have some last thing, some question.
No, I have only maybe a trivial question. I'd like to know how many time did you spend on developing, designing, and publishing the platform, the design toolkit?
Well, I mean, it's 5 years, and I'm in the last probably 3 years, I've been working more or less 100% of my time on this. And writing and sharing our experiences is, I think, more or less 30% of my work time.
So from tomorrow, how we can use your platform design toolkit to enable these people to work on their own territories?
Well, first of all, you can go to the website and download everything and try to watch look at the user guide, trying to read the user guide. And I would say that the best way to do that is to do that. So you actually try to use the tools to design something that you prototype, and actually you need to validate and prototype. So actually, I would say use it, and this is going to be how do you start, because sometimes we tend to lose ourselves into endless reading, exploring, and so on. But at some point, I think I've been in touch with so many great innovators in the last few years, and our toolkit has been downloaded by more or less 20,000 people. And we have been training directly something like 400 people. And every time I got in touch, and a lot of these projects are in the social innovation context. Like I would say probably something like 40%. And I got people from India or Canada or South America that are just writing us and say, we are using the tools to do this. And so that's how you start. You go, you download, you read the blog, you join our events, and that's what we are trying to do. In the next year, we are going to build more services for the community of practice, because, of course, it's interesting to facilitate workshops and to do consulting. But what we want to do, we want to enable more entities in our ecosystems to use our tools and to essentially do their own stuff, without our control.
There is a new question. Maybe you can read, Simone.
Yep.
I can read it while you are reading. What does it mean to play the role of the architect? how can the architect intercept the real needs of an ecosystem before going through the design process? This is Valeria Loretti asking. So,
but well, I will be quick. So essentially, first of all, you need to get out of the building and catch what we call the weak signals. No, so what are people doing? So we always say that platform innovation is making a platform. The parallel that I use is this: you're never going to design a solution for a problem that doesn't exist, and you're never going to make a platform for an ecosystem that doesn't exist. No? So first thing you do, you try to understand if this ecosystem exists, you speak with people, you see what are they trying to achieve. Then, of course, you can enter the process of designing, do the strategic design, so based on your assumptions, essentially. After that, you go and validate, and then you prototype. Okay, let's say that you're prototyping, your validation works, and then you have the strategy, you have the platform. Then it's going to be about listening. So designing strategies and platforms that are allowing disobedience in the ecosystem. So letting people to do a little bit more or different from what you design. It's always a good idea, so that you can catch what they're trying to achieve on top of the layer that you built with your platform. And then within time, you institutionalize these layers. You grow in the value chain, institutionalizing more behaviors, let's say. But everything starts from listening to the weak signals. Go out, listen, see what people are doing. So be part of this ecosystem and trying to understand if they are trying to express their potential. I always say that platform design is like using an amplifier. So you cannot amplify a signal that doesn't exist. So if the signal is there, then with the platform you can amplify the signal. You can make the ecosystem grow fast and wide, but the signal needs to be there. No, the potential needs to be, the seed needs to be there.
So yes, I think amazing session. I think it's good time to
thank you guys. It was amazing.
Close up yes, no, really inspiring. Personally, I really enjoyed. I think all the listening was really interesting, and the people that is listening, and maybe other people that will watch the video after, they will enjoy for sure. So thanks a lot, and we will, as you know, with the Civic network, we are also trying to do something similar that you also mentioned. So we hope we have in future more opportunity to share with you, because it's really, really inspiring. So
thank you,
thanks
guys.
a lot.
Besides the technical issues, it was very interesting to chat.
Yeah, this was a pity, the technical issue. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.